Hey y'all, it's Tyler again with Cast Album Chat with Tyler. So today we're going to be switching gears a little bit to celebrate my new haircut, which I had in my last video as well, but we're gonna say it's a new day. We're gonna be talking about hair today. And the cool thing about hair is like I said, it's a complete change from what we were talking about before. We had Evita, which did start as a rock opera, then we went to the world of Sondheim, and now we're talking about kind of the OG rock musical. So here it is, cast recordings of Hair. So I'm back again with my little squeaky chair, just, my disclaimer here. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because we actually have a mix of vinyls and CDs. And I should have called this thing Vinyl and Vermouth because I drink copious amounts of vermouth. But for the kids out there, we're just going to call it Cast Album Chat with Tyler. So Hair is one of those shows that I had never seen before I got the recording. I had always heard great things about it and just wanted to see what the score was like. And when I listened to it for the first time, it almost kind of struck me as a show that was really full of jingles. Some of these songs are 30 seconds long, and they really, some of them, not in a pejorative way at all, but some of them do sound like commercial jingles. So it's a very, very different score than what you would normally get in musical theater up to this point, and even after. It changed the game, but it also is its own animal, and we had not, well, I say we, like I was around in 1967. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before, and really we haven't seen anything since. It is the big brother of shows like Rent, or even later on Hamilton, putting popular music, using that vernacular in musical theater it kind of paved the way for that. So we're going to talk about the bajillion cast recordings of Hair today. You're going to see what I'm talking about in a second. So this is just a fraction of the CDs that I have of Hair. This show, it came out whenever cast recordings were really part of popular music. And so it seemed like every company that opened, and even some of them were studio cast recordings. There wasn't even a company to speak of. They just thought, well, we need our own version of Hair, so we're gonna release it. So you're starting to see all these countries across the world release their own version. And the cool thing about Hair is that it was a show that, yes, it did have a set script, but even in the original productions, since two of the authors were in the cast, they would just kind of change it however they chose, each evening. And something about Hair that I really like about these early recordings is that they were made during the time of the hippie movement. So a lot of the times what you'll see is some of the people in the cast, if not all of the cast, are actual hippies. And so they're living their lives out on stage. They get to sing their hippie anthem, Let the Sun Shine In, and they're very, very powerful statements. They're anti-war statements, anti-racial or racist statements, and these are things that we're even seeing today. So while it is a timely show, even in 2021, it was so modern that every performance every night was kind of the newest version of Hair that was out there. And it was talking about what was happening in the streets, what was happening overseas, what was happening with the world as a whole, and you'll see that later on in different productions. It was really popular around the world between its writing in 1967 and about 1971, 72-ish. And that coincides with the Vietnam War. And you actually start to hear text changes and how they were updating the show as it was happening kind of in real time. So let's talk about all these wonderful cast recordings of Hair. As I've said in earlier videos, generally my go-to cast recordings are not the original recordings. That's really not the case with Hair. I probably need to go back on that a little bit because you can't get any more authentic than the original Broadway cast of Hair. I also have this on LP, not the original version, but the remastered version that just came out. And there are some things on let's see when this one was reprinted. 1988, this one was. There's a newer version that I'll talk about in just a second. But this one has more material than the original LP had on it before, just because of time constraints, what you can put on a CD as opposed to vinyl. I don't think you can get better than this one. This one is, it's life-affirming, it's rough and raw, and these singers are probably not people that you would go out and get their solo albums, because they're not just singing a score, they're kind of living it, you know, and it's something that I've been listening to probably since high school, and has always made me so happy when I listen to it. And even though it sounds kind of weird, the original Broadway cast recording is my go-to recording of Hair. So not to say that it's all downhill from here, stay with me on this video, but this is the one. So I don't know what I did with my other release of the original Broadway cast recording, but it came out in a 2 CD release as well, with the original off-Broadway cast from 1967. This is a 1968 recording, and the 1967 off-Broadway cast recording has some of the same cast. You know, it does have, I just want to make sure that I'm getting these names right. Jerome Ragney, James Rado, Galt McDermott. Galt McDermott wrote the music, but Jerome Ragney and James Rado were in the original cast and the original Broadway cast. You can hear them on both. Yeah, it's a weird recording, I have to say that, because it's not what we're used to hearing, because this is kind of the one that we've heard our whole lives. There were different kind of like plot twists. One of the characters was an alien from a different planet. It was a filmmaker, I think. They did away with a lot of that stuff when they brought it to Broadway, but it is very interesting to listen to kind of go back and listen to the roots of Hair, pun intended, to go back and listen to it. It's kind of like going back and hearing some of the original, I'm gonna compare this a lot to Rent, hearing some of the original workshop recordings of Rent and how it grew over time and to become what it really became. So that is the original Broadway and off-Broadway cast recordings. So now I'm going to try to go through these really quickly because there are a ton of these suckers. This is the 1968 London cast recording, which is also kind of interesting. They did 2 separate recordings, one in 1968 with the original cast and another in 1970. And so they released 2 cast recordings, Hair, the original London cast, and Fresh Hair, which had some of the stuff that was not recorded before 1968. What's interesting about this this show is I think it was really, really easy to produce in other countries. Of course, the translation might take a long time, so they didn't have to wait for the translation on this. So they zipped it right over to London in a matter of months. It wasn't years like we have nowadays. It was months before it came over. Huge success. What they did on this CD is they took the original London cast recording of Hair and Fresh Hair, and it's kind of an amalgamation of the two. They have left off some things, I believe, from both recordings just to make it a more cohesive, similar to its sister production on Broadway. But you know, you get some kind of fun stuff in here. Paul Nicholas is in here, Oliver Tobias is in here, and Elaine Page is actually in the 1970 cast, and you might be able to hear her voice kind of sticking out from the ensemble every once in a while. So yeah, this is the 1968 London cast recording of Hair. Okay, a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. Also in 1968, there was a version of Hair that was put together with the blessing of the authors in Acapulco, Mexico. And this was actually not a translated piece. There are a couple of lines in there that were spoken in Spanish. The cast is kind of a mix between maybe some people that had been in subsequent versions of Hair. You know, after Broadway, they had maybe San Francisco, Chicago, LA companies that went down to do it, plus some Mexican cast members. The really, really cool thing about this is not necessarily the recording itself. There are some nice voices on here, but it's the whole show. It's the whole shebang. So when this came out on LP, it was 3 discs. This is only 2, but it's the whole show. And so you get some of the sequences that you miss in the original Broadway and London cast recordings. For completeness sake, this is really cool, but a little bit hard to find, to be honest. Side note on this, this production is it played, I believe, maybe some previews and 1 performance. It's kind of legend whether they did the nude scene at the end of Act 1 or they didn't do it, because they were told by local authorities that they could not do the nude scene in the show. plus a lot of other things. You know, this is a little bit more risque than some of the other shows that had come before it. And so the cast came back into the theater the next day after their opening, and they were told that they had to not only stop doing the production, they had to leave the country. So the authors of the show that were also down there at the time for the premiere, plus the whole American side of the cast, were deported from the country. And there were, you know, some of the Mexican cast members were threatened with being jailed. They were harassed, you know. So this production has a lot of history to it, and it just kind of goes into the whole mythos of Hair and how crazy and wackadoo and mythical, you know, the creation of the show and the development, its international development. And we'll go into a little bit more of that with these bajillion other recordings. All right, here we have Haare, the original German cast recording of Hair. So this show opened in Munich, which is kind of not really shocking. You know, the last video I talked about Into the Woods, and Into the Woods premiered in German, I think, in Munich. And this show did open in Munich. And while they do have a lot of musicals in Munich, all over Germany actually, Germany is, the whole country is a huge fan of musical theater. It wasn't Hamburg or Berlin where this opened in Munich. And I used to have the complete recording of this. This is the original version from 1968. Like I said, they were rushing these things out to other countries. Not really much in the liner notes. You know, this is kind of what you get. It's a really cool logo there. But, you know, they did this original version in the studio in 1960, and I believe the next one came in 1970 or 1971, and it was called Das ganze Hair, Das ganze Hair, the whole hair. So you get the full show, kind of like the Mexican cast recording, but in German. The singers are wonderful. You just have German hippies on this one as opposed to American hippies or Mexican hippies. The other cool side note about this is that Donna Summer was in the original cast, and I believe she played Dion, but she definitely sings part of White Boys in this, and she went by Donna Gaines at that time. And if you know anything about her life, she did spend a lot of time in Germany earlier on, and this is one of the things that she got up to. So listen to this for the Donna Summer. This one's easy to track down. The second complete recording, a little bit more difficult to find, but you can find it. All right, here's where we get into vermouth and vinyl right here, because there were so many versions of the show that a lot of these things never made it to CD. You know, they were released on vinyl, and that was the last time they saw the light of day. So this is the original Amsterdam cast recording of Hair. The weird thing about this is they also made two recordings. The first one was done in English, and I don't know if the whole production was done in English or not. I do know that some of these actors, for example, let me see if I can find who it was. I think it was Oliver Tobias, also did the London cast. And I think he might be German, Dutch, English, kind of a mix. And so I think he spoke more than one language at a native level. But this cast is strange because this whole recording here is in English. And then there is another, it's called the gray cover. This is the photo cover. And there's another one that's a gray cover that you can check out on castalbums.org. That has a lot of Dutch, or some Dutch stuff in it at least. I know My Conviction in that one is in Dutch, which is not included on this recording if I am reading it correctly, and I am. Go me. So yeah, if you want to check it out by Dutch cast in English, the original Amsterdam cast, only on vinyl, both versions. Hair en français. So I don't speak French at all, so I don't really listen to this recording very much, but you know, it's a bunch of French hippies singing these songs that everybody loves. And if you want to check it out, it did come out on CD, and I'll probably get it on CD one of these days, but it came out on LP with this kind of simple cover. Definitely worth a listen, especially if you're a musical theater fan that is learning French for some reason, or thinks that you might want to perform in France. Take a look, because this is one of the kind of the earlier French cast recordings of a show. Sorry about that glare, that looks awful. Anyway, yeah, so this is one of the first French cast recordings of a show, and definitely worth checking out. So here we go. Let me take this out of the little slick here. This is the original Brazilian cast recording of Hair, and it opened in Sao Paulo in 1969. So like I said, they're rushing the show out so that everybody around the world can see it. I think it was something that local producers really, there was, it was a kind of a feather in their cap if they could get Hair out in their country. And this one, I think it's a great recording. It has a lot of energy, very much like the original Broadway production. You might not go out and buy their solo albums, but this is a really, really, really cool LP. Never came out on CD. And in the cast was Sonia Braga, who later on in the movie version of Kiss of the Spider Woman played the Spider Woman, and I think was even in a few episodes of Sex and the City. So check it out if you are learning Portuguese, or if you just have an affinity for all things Brazilian. Check this one out. Can you believe I got all the way through talking about hair in Portuguese from Brazil, hair, Brazilian, and I didn't make that pun? Missed opportunity, sorry. But this is the original Argentinian cast recording of Hair. All in Spanish, or as they say, en castellano. It's a wonderful cast that is listed on here somewhere, but it doesn't tell you who plays who. And it's just a little slip of a thing, it's just a little cardboard cover, but this is one of my favorites. As a Spanish speaker, this is a really fun one to listen to, and this is when I actually might buy some people's solo album. I think that Sheila's really good. Easy to Be Hard is one of my favorite versions on this one, so if you can find it, it pops up on eBay quite a bit. Check it out, the original Argentina cast of Hair. Are you still there? Because there are a lot of recordings of this show. We're going up to Scandinavia right now, and I'm going to talk about these 3 recordings here. The original Stockholm, Swedish version, the original Swedish cast recording that I have in a, sorry, I don't want to take it out. It's in a frame here. And this one's really interesting. They re-orchestrated it. Well, it's just a band, so it's not an orchestra, but it's got different arrangements on it. And it's kind of like an acid jazz sort of version. And what I've heard about this one is that a lot of the people in the cast were really just actors and not so much hippies. So they took it from a very different point of view, and you can hear it on the recording that this recording is not quite like the others. You don't get as much of the music on this version as you would some other ones, but if you can find it, check this one out. It's really, really cool. The next one from Scandinavia, trigger warning, if you don't like boobies, I'm so sorry about it, but the original Danish Copenhagen cast recording. This is from 1971. And this one right here is one of my favorites. It has so much energy in it. The cast, you'll see them popping up in other things later on in Jesus Christ Superstar, not only in Denmark, but also in Sweden. And if you can find this, it did come out on CD at one point. I've got it down here somewhere. This little, just, smaller boobies. So if you can find it on CD, I definitely recommend it. It's remastered, this version, and one of my favorite casts. Not only the principal singers, but also the ensemble. It's music directed within an inch of its life, and you can really tell. So this, out of all of the Scandinavian productions, this is the one to go for. And we also have the original Norwegian cast recording, and this production did not take place in Oslo, like many musicals do in Norway. This was in Bergen, which is the second smallest city, the second largest city in Norway. And this one was taken live. So it has a very, very different feel to it. It's rough, it's raw. Maybe not even finished, I would say. I feel like they recorded this very early on in the run, or it was not a very long run. But this is really, really cool to see that didn't just make it to the capital cities. This made it to, second largest city in Norway, which is not a very big country, therefore not a very big city, but it really filled out all corners of the world. So we're staying up in the same part of the world, and we're looking at the Finnish cast recording of Hair. This one is also really, really cool because they had a band play with them. It wasn't just like a rock band. They had trumpets and saxes, and you can hear them on the recording. This is very, very rare. And you can find it on LP as well. I just have not found it yet for a reasonable price in a good condition. But if you can find this one, this is from Tampere, which is, I also believe, the second largest, technically kind of the second largest city in Finland, after Helsinki. If you don't count some of the suburb cities around Helsinki, this Tampere is removed from Helsinki. And the really, really cool thing about this is an amateur cast. They say it's from the Tampereen Pop Teatri, from 1971. And the cast, I don't know if they were paid or if they were not paid, but they are fantastic. They have so much energy, and it's really cool, once again, to see how this show just kind of took over the whole world. Okay, so now we're moving down to Israel. This is a really cool recording because NMC Records took a lot of the original Tel Aviv cast recordings of shows and put them on kind of this, was on a label, you know. So this is the original cover right here, and they all have this little blue curtain around them. But it's remastered, sounds great. Everything is kind of turned upside down from what it usually is because obviously Hebrew is written in a very different way. It's so we're left to right, they're right to left. So it's really cool that you can see the credits. You know, they have credits on one side going in another direction. We have credits on the other side. This is a really, really great cast. And this was headed up by other members of other international companies. And you can definitely hear it in this recording that it's halfway across the world, but it still maintains the feel of Hair. So I can't do a Hair video and not talk about the original soundtrack, which I believe is from 1979, 1978, somewhere around that area. This is a remastered version that came out in the 90s. It is really great. The singers are pretty good, you know, other than some of the leads were just movie stars, but you know, the rest of the ensemble, it's even got Betty Buckley in this thing, so the singing is very good. The only thing that I really don't care for is it's not a very good representation of the stage show, and additionally, the arrangements have nothing to do with the show, and so it feels like they're playing it being hippies as opposed to actually being hippies. And maybe not being so successful at it because they're 10 years down the road now. And so, you know, they did get a little bit of hindsight, I guess, maybe, but it doesn't ring true to me. So get it if you like Hair sung exceptionally well, but it's not the best recording ever. So pardon me, I had to look over to the side on this one. I actually have a lot of recordings of Hair that I've heard. I don't condone sharing things illegally with people, although some of these things you can find on YouTube. I don't know about the legality of it, so I'm not going to endorse going out to listen to those things, but just so you know, sometimes they exist. But some of the other recordings, I have to look at my TV over here because it has the list of things on it. I do not have the original Australian cast from 1969 Sydney. I've heard it's really good, but a bit weird in the way that they recorded it. It's not in show order. And so I think from what I've heard, the voices are really great. It's still, you know, kind of a hippie cast, but it's not really what you would have seen on stage. There is also the original Rome cast recording from Italy. And I've heard this before, and it really made a big impression on me. It's one of the European productions, kind of like the Danish one, that has a lot of energy to it. So if you can find it, it's worth checking out. It just usually goes for a higher price than most of the other cast recordings of Hair. So that's why I haven't bit the bullet yet. There's also the 1971 Tokyo cast recording, which is also the same. It's kind of interesting to see that even the hippie movement made it all the way to Tokyo. And I've also heard this one before. I don't remember it very well, but I remember thinking, that's what Hair sounds like in Japanese. It's exactly what I would have envisioned in my mind's eye if somebody was talking about Hair in Japanese in 1971. So that's worth checking out if you can find it. That's also another one. It's on LP and CD. Both kind of go at crazy prices, so good luck if you find it. I hope you find it. I hope you love it, but it's just not in my collection yet. And then the last thing that I have to say about Hair is, you know, as I said before, the original recordings from about 1967 to 1971, 72 still had the hippie feel to them. And then we had a little lull in the 80s. I don't think there were any major recordings of Hair that came out in the 80s. And then they started reviving it again coming into the 90s. So there was a Icelandic production, an Australian production, the West End revival that came out. Of course, this is after there was a Broadway revival in the 70s as well that did not have a recording. But some of these productions that I'm looking at now, sorry, I'm not looking you in the eye, but there was a 1992 Sydney cast recording, a 1992 Zurich cast recording, 1993 London revival recording, 94 Reykjavik, Iceland, 96 Budapest, 96 two recordings from Denmark, one in English, one in Danish, 1996 from Prague, 2003 European tour in English, 2004 Akureyri from Iceland, which is a really, really cool city. We're gonna have probably a whole episode on cast recordings from Akureyri, Iceland. This sounds a lot like the movie soundtrack, so that's interesting. From 2004. Brno, Czech Republic from 2004. The 2010 Barcelona cast recording, which I do have in my collection. It's in a little cardboard sleeve as well. If it's in Spanish, I have to have it. So this one I did actually bite the bullet and get this one. Fantastic cast. But it just it's really kind of, I think, overproduced in a way, not at the fault of necessarily anyone involved. It's just, you're not going to have a 1968 show ring true in 2010, through our modern lens. So, and then also there's a 2011 Akureyri cast again. There's the 2018 London revival cast, and then there was also the most recent Broadway revival cast. All of the singers are uniformly fantastic, but I just kind of shy away from these ones because they are, to me, they're not really Hair. You know, it's a different interpretation of Hair, and I prefer to hear the original version. I believe there was also an Actors Fund concert that wasn't a production, but you get to hear a lot of the music in a different version, which is a lot of fun as well, but not really a cast recording of Hair. So, at this point, I have not edited this video yet, and I'm thinking it's probably about 3 hours long. It's kind of like the Dances of Wolves of cast recordings. There are a ton of recordings of this show. Each production has so much history. There are so many anecdotes that I want to tell that I'm having to miss out. I can't even talk about the actors and the music directors and the directors and the specific circumstances around each production. But Hair is something that is near and dear to me. I did get to do a production over 10 years ago, which makes me feel very old. But I have good memories from doing that. And you know, for years after, I was listening to that original Broadway cast recording, and like I said, that's the one to go to, and it's the easiest one to find. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Cast Album Chat with Tyler, and I hope you found out everything you could possibly want to know about all of the cast recordings of Hair. See you next time.